Jason Parker's rusted Honda Civic sputtered through the pouring rain, his third double shift this week weighing heavy on his shoulders. The windshield wipers struggled against the downpour as he spotted her, a frail, elderly woman battling with a broken umbrella on the corner of Maple Street. He didn't know that stopping for this stranger would change everything. He didn't know that 5 minutes of kindness would unlock a door to a future he never dared imagine. He didn't know that sometimes the smallest gestures create the biggest miracles. But as he pulled over, one question lingered in the storm-filled air. Could a simple act of compassion rewrite the story of two lonely souls forever? Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button for more real, emotional, life-changing stories like this, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. The rain hammered against Jason Parker's windshield with the persistence of his mounting bills, each drop seeming to echo the rhythm of his exhausted heartbeat. His hands gripped the steering wheel of his 12-year-old Honda Civic, knuckles white, not from the treacherous driving conditions, but from the weight of another 16-hour day that had left him feeling like a ghost of the man he used to be. The digital clock on his dashboard glowed 11 p.m., a cruel reminder that tomorrow would bring another marathon of work, another day of trying to be everything to everyone while feeling like he was failing at it all. Jason had become intimately familiar with this route home from his second job at the warehouse, where he spent his nights loading trucks after his day shift at the auto repair shop. The streets of Millbrook looked different in the rain, the familiar landmarks blurred into impressionist paintings of his former life, when he and Sarah would drive these same roads planning their future together. Now, 3 years after losing her to cancer, these streets served as a pathway between the two jobs that barely kept him and his 8-year-old daughter Emma afloat. The radio crackled with static, the weather report announcing flood warnings that made Jason's stomach tighten with familiar anxiety. Emma was safe at home with Mrs. Rodriguez, their neighbor who watched her during his late shifts. But the thought of driving through rising water to get to his little girl always made his pulse quicken. He had learned to live with constant worry, the kind that settled into your bones and changed the way you breathed, the way you slept, the way you saw the world around you. As he turned onto Maple Street, his headlights caught something that made him slow down despite his eagerness to get home. An elderly woman stood at the bus stop, her small frame hunched against the storm, wrestling with an umbrella that had clearly surrendered to the wind. The black fabric hung in tatters, offering no protection against the relentless downpour that had already soaked through her light jacket and turned her gray hair into wet strands clinging to her scalp. Jason's first instinct was to keep driving. He was exhausted. His back ached from lifting heavy boxes all evening, and Emma would be waiting up for him despite Mrs. Rodriguez's attempts to get her to bed on time. The responsible thing, the practical thing, would be to continue home to his daughter who needed him more than a stranger ever could. But as his car drew closer to the bus stop, something in the woman's posture stopped him cold. She wasn't just waiting for a bus that clearly wasn't coming at this hour in this weather. She was standing there with the resigned acceptance of someone who had nowhere else to go, no one else to call, no other options in a world that had forgotten she existed. Jason recognized that particular kind of loneliness because he had felt it himself in the darkest moments after Sarah's death, when the silence in their house became so oppressive he could barely breathe. Without fully deciding to do it, Jason found himself pulling over to the curb, his hazard lights blinking through the rain like a beacon of possibility. He rolled down his passenger window, immediately feeling the sting of cold raindrops on his face as he leaned across the worn fabric of his seat. "Ma'am," he called out, raising his voice above the storm. "You need a ride somewhere?" The woman looked up, startled, her eyes wide with the kind of caution that comes from years of living in a world where strangers were more likely to bring harm than help. She was probably in her 70s, Jason guessed, with features that spoke of someone who had once been quite beautiful, and still carried traces of that beauty in the graceful way she held herself despite her circumstances. Her clothes, though soaked, appeared to be of good quality, suggesting this wasn't someone accustomed to standing at bus stops in the rain. "Oh," she said, her voice carrying a slight tremor that could have been from the cold or from surprise. "I don't want to be any trouble. The bus should be along soon." Jason glanced at his watch, and then at the bus schedule posted at the stop, the last bus having departed more than 2 hours ago. "Ma'am, I don't think there are any more buses tonight. It's almost midnight, and with this storm, I doubt they're running late routes anyway." The woman followed his gaze to the schedule, her shoulders sagging slightly as reality settled in. She looked back at Jason's car, her expression cycling through uncertainty, embarrassment, and something that might have been hope. "I live on Elm Street," she said hesitantly, "near the old library. It's not far, but I understand if you'd rather not. I'm a stranger, after all." "We're all strangers until we're not," Jason replied, surprised by his own words. He reached across and opened the passenger door, the dome light illuminating the interior of his modest car with its cracked dashboard and worn seats. "Come on, get in before you catch pneumonia." The woman hurried to the car, her movements surprisingly quick despite her age. As she settled into the passenger seat, Jason caught the faint scent of lavender perfume mixed with the smell of rain, a combination that reminded him achingly of his mother, who had passed away when Emma was just 2 years. "Oh." "Thank you so much," the woman said, pulling the seatbelt across her chest with slightly shaking hands. "I'm Eleanor Whitman. I was visiting a friend at the hospital and I guess I lost track of time. When I came out, my car wouldn't start." "Jason Parker," he replied, pulling back into traffic. "And don't worry about it. We've all been there." As they drove through the rain-slicked streets, Jason found himself stealing glances at his unexpected passenger. Eleanor sat with perfect posture despite her wet clothes, her hands folded neatly in her lap in a way that spoke of a generation raised on manners and propriety. She had stopped shivering now that she was out of the rain, and in the warm interior of the car, she seemed to relax slightly. "You work late," she observed, not as a question but as a gentle statement that invited conversation without demanding it. "2 jobs," Jason admitted, surprising himself with his honesty. He rarely talked about his circumstances with strangers, having grown tired of the pitying looks and well-meaning advice that usually followed such revelations. "Trying to keep my head above water. You know how it is." Eleanor nodded with understanding that seemed to come from experience rather than polite sympathy. "It's not easy raising a family these days. Do you have children?" "A daughter," Jason said, his voice softening the way it always did when he talked about Emma. "She's 8. Emma. She's probably waiting up for me right now, even though she's supposed to be in bed." 8 is a wonderful age," Eleanor said, her eyes growing distant with what Jason assumed were memories of her own. "Children or grandchildren. They still believe in magic at 8, but they're starting to understand the world too. It's a beautiful balance." Jason turned onto Elm Street, the familiar landmarks of this older neighborhood coming into view through the rain. The houses here were larger than in his part of town, many of them Victorian-era homes that had been lovingly maintained by families who had the time and resources to preserve their character. Eleanor directed him to a modest but charming 2-story house with a wraparound porch and garden that even in the darkness and rain showed signs of careful tending. "This is perfect," Eleanor said as Jason pulled into her driveway. "Thank you so much, Mr. Parker. You've been incredibly kind." "Just Jason," he corrected gently. "And it was no trouble at all. I hope your friend at the hospital is okay." Eleanor's expression grew sad. "Thank you for asking. She's not doing well, I'm afraid. Cancer. It's been a long fight." Jason felt his chest tighten at the word, the familiar stab of grief and memory that still caught him off guard even 3 years later. "I'm sorry to hear that. Cancer it's a hell of a thing." Something in his tone must have conveyed more than his words, because Eleanor looked at him with sudden understanding. "You've been touched by it too." "My wife," Jason said simply. 3 years ago? Eleanor reached over and placed her small, warm hand on his arm. The gesture was brief, but filled with the kind of compassion that can only come from someone who has walked through similar darkness. "I'm so sorry for your loss." "And you're raising your daughter alone?" Jason nodded, not trusting his voice for a moment. It was strange how grief could still ambush him like this, triggered by the kindness of a stranger in a rain-soaked car. "She's lucky to have you," Eleanor said firmly. "I can tell you're a good father just by the way your voice changes when you talk about her." "I try to be," Jason managed. "Some days are harder than others." "The hardest days are often when we're doing our best work," Eleanor said, her voice carrying the weight of lived wisdom. "Love isn't always easy, but it's always worth it." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the rain continuing to drum against the car roof. Jason found himself reluctant to end this unexpected conversation. This brief respite from his usual isolation, there was something about Eleanor that reminded him of the grandmother he had never known, the kind of woman who seemed to carry stories and wisdom in the lines of her face. "Well," Eleanor said finally, reaching for the door handle, "I should let you get home to that daughter of yours." "Thank you again, Jason. You've restored my faith in humanity tonight." "Wait," Jason said impulsively, reaching into his glove compartment for a pen and an old receipt. He scribbled his phone number on the back. "In case your car gives you trouble again, or if you need a ride to the CR. Hospital. I know what it's like to feel like you're handling everything alone." Eleanor took the paper, her eyes brightening with genuine surprise and gratitude. "That's very kind of you." "More than kind. You don't even know me. Like I said, we're all strangers until we're not." Eleanor smiled, and Jason could see traces of the beautiful young woman she must have been. "You know, I have a good feeling about you, Jason Parker. I think good things are coming your way." "I hope you're right," Jason said, meaning it more than he had meant anything in a long time. Eleanor gathered her purse and stepped out into the rain, but she paused before closing the door. "Take care of yourself, dear. And give that little girl of yours an extra hug tonight." Jason watched until she reached her front door safely, then backed out of the driveway and headed home. The encounter had lasted maybe 15 minutes, but something about it lingered with him as he drove through the quiet streets. There had been something special about Eleanor, something that made him feel less alone in the world, even if he couldn't quite put his finger on what it was. When he arrived home, Emma was indeed waiting up for him, curled up on the couch in her pajamas with a book in her lap and her eyes fighting sleep. Mrs. Rodriguez had fallen asleep in the armchair, the television playing quietly in the background. "Daddy," Emma whispered, scrambling off the couch to hug him around the waist. "You're all wet." "Just a little rain, sweetheart," Jason said, lifting her up despite his tired muscles. "What are you doing up? It's way past your bedtime." "I couldn't sleep," Emma confessed, resting her head on his shoulder. "I missed you." Jason's heart clenched with the familiar mixture of love and guilt that defined his existence as a single parent. He wanted to give Emma everything, to be everything she needed, but there were only so many hours in the day, and only so much energy in his exhausted body. "I missed you too, baby girl," he said, carrying her toward the stairs. "But you need your sleep for school tomorrow." As he tucked Emma into bed, she looked up at him with eyes that were too wise for her 8 years. "Daddy, are you okay?" "You look sad." Jason smoothed her hair back from her forehead, marveling at how perceptive children could be. "I'm not sad, sweetheart. Just tired. It was a long day." "Maybe tomorrow will be better," Emma said with the optimism that only children possessed. "Maybe it will," Jason agreed, kissing her forehead. "Sweet dreams, Em." After ensuring Mrs. Rodriguez got home safely, Jason finally allowed himself to collapse into his own bed. As he lay there listening to the rain against his window, his thoughts drifted back to Eleanor Whitman. There had been something about her, something beyond simple gratitude for a ride home. She had looked at him like she could see past the exhaustion and the worry to something he had forgotten. Existed. Some part of himself that wasn't defined entirely by loss and struggle. The next few weeks passed in their usual blur of work, school, and the countless small tasks that filled the life of a single parent. Jason found himself thinking about Eleanor occasionally, wondering how her friend at the hospital was doing, hoping her car troubles had been resolved. He had half expected her to call, not because she needed another ride, but because their brief conversation had felt unfinished somehow. Like the beginning of something rather than a simple exchange between strangers. Emma had started a new unit on community helpers at school, and she peppered Jason with questions about his work, about helping people, about what it meant to be kind to strangers. Her teacher had assigned a project about everyday heroes, and Emma had decided to write about her father, a decision that both warmed Jason's heart and made him uncomfortable with the attention. "Miss Johnson says heroes don't always wear capes," Emma announced over breakfast one morning, her spoon clinking against her cereal bowl. "She says sometimes heroes are just people who help other people when they occur. Don't have to." "That's a nice way to think about it," Jason agreed, gulping down his coffee and checking his watch. He was already running late for his morning shift, but these conversations with Emma were too precious to rush. "Like when you gave that old lady a ride in the rain," Emma continued. "Mrs. Rodriguez told me about it." That was heroic. Jason paused in gathering his work clothes. "Mrs. Rodriguez has a big mouth," he said with mock severity that made Emma giggle. "But it was nice, right? Helping someone when you were tired?" "It was the right thing to do," Jason said, ruffling her hair. "And it wasn't that big a deal, Em. Just a few minutes out of my day." "Sometimes a few minutes can change everything," Emma said with surprising seriousness. Jason looked at his daughter, struck once again by her capacity for insight. At 8 years old, she had already learned lessons about loss and resilience that many adults never mastered, but she had somehow retained her faith in the goodness of people and the power of small kindnesses. "You're pretty smart, you know that?" Jason said, hugging her tight. "I get it from you," Emma replied, squeezing him back. The morning routine continued as always, Emma off to school and Jason to his first job at Henderson's Auto Repair. The work was honest and straightforward. Problems that could be diagnosed and fixed with the right tools and enough patience. Jason found comfort in the mechanical nature of it, the way a broken engine could be made whole again with understanding and effort. His coworker Mike often joked that Jason could fix anything except his own life, a comment that stung because it carried too much truth. Jason was excellent at his job, respected by customers and colleagues alike, but he couldn't seem to apply the same methodical problem-solving approach to his personal struggles. The bills kept coming, the exhaustion kept building, and the future remained as uncertain as it had been the day Sarah died. Around lunchtime, Jason's phone rang while he was elbow-deep in replacing a transmission. He almost didn't answer. But something made him wipe his hands and check the caller ID. It was a number he didn't recognize, with a local area code. "Hello?" he answered, stepping outside into the autumn sunshine. "Is this Jason Parker?" The voice was professional, formal, belonging to someone accustomed to making important phone calls. "Yes, this is Jason." "Mr. Parker, this is Robert Chen from Chen and Associates, a law firm here in town. I'm calling about Eleanor Whitman. I understand you knew her?" Jason felt his stomach drop, the kind of sudden fear that came with unexpected phone calls about people you cared about. "Yes, I knew Eleanor. Is she okay?" There was a pause, the kind that carried bad news in its silence. I'm sorry to have to tell you this, Mr. Parker, but Mrs. Whitman passed away last week. She had a heart attack in her sleep. Very peaceful, according to her doctor. Jason leaned against the brick wall of the auto shop, feeling suddenly unsteady. He had known Eleanor for all of 15 minutes. But the news hit him harder than he would have expected. There had been something about her, something vital and warm, that made her death feel like a personal loss. I'm sorry to hear that, Jason managed. She seemed like a wonderful person. She was indeed, Mr. Chen agreed. Mr. Parker, the reason I'm calling is that Mrs. Whitman mentioned you in her will. She left specific instructions that I should contact you regarding her estate. Jason straightened up, confused. I'm sorry, there must be some mistake. I barely knew Mrs. Whitman. I just gave her a ride home one night. Yes, she mentioned that, Mr. Chen said. She was quite specific about the circumstances. Mr. Parker, would it be possible for you to come to my office this afternoon? There are some documents you need to see, and some decisions that need to be made. Decisions? Jason felt like he was having a conversation in a foreign language. I don't understand. It would be better if we discussed this in person, Mr. Chen said gently. Are you available around 3 o'clock? Jason looked back at the auto shop, mentally calculating his workload and his schedule. He had been planning to work straight through until it was time for his evening shift at the warehouse. But something in the lawyer's tone suggested this was important, perhaps urgent. I can be there, Jason said. Can you give me the address? The law offices of Chen & Associates occupied the second floor of a renovated Victorian mansion downtown, the kind of building that spoke of established respectability and old money. Jason felt out of place as he climbed the carpeted stairs, his work clothes and calloused hands marking him as someone who didn't belong in such refined surroundings. The receptionist, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a professional demeanor, showed him into a conference room where Robert Chen was waiting. The lawyer was younger than Jason had expected, probably in his early 40s, with an easy manner that helped put Jason at ease. Thank you for coming, Mr. Parker, Mr. Chen said, gesturing for Jason to take a seat at the polished conference table. I know this must be confusing. Can I offer you some coffee or water? Coffee would be great, Jason admitted, realizing he hadn't eaten lunch and caffeine might help him process whatever he was about to learn. As the receptionist brought coffee and closed the door behind her, Mr. Chen opened a thick folder and pulled out several documents. Mr. Parker, let me start by explaining what I know about your relationship with Mrs. Whitman, and then we'll discuss why you're here. Jason nodded, wrapping his hands around the warm coffee cup. According to Mrs. Whitman's notes, you gave her a ride home during a rainstorm approximately 3 weeks ago. She was stranded at a bus stop, and you stopped to help her even though you didn't know her, and were clearly tired from a long day of work. Is that accurate? Yes, Jason said. But it wasn't a big deal. Anyone would have done the same thing. Mrs. Whitman didn't think so, Mr. Chen said gently. She came to see me the next day to update her will. She told me that in all her 73 years, very few people had shown her genuine kindness without expecting anything in return. She said you listened to her, treated her with respect, and made her feel seen and valued. Jason shifted uncomfortably in his chair. We just talked during the drive. She seemed lonely. She was lonely, Mr. Chen confirmed. Mrs. Whitman had no children, and her husband died 15 years ago. Her closest relatives are nieces and nephews who rarely visited, and most of her friends had passed away or moved to assisted living facilities. She spent most of her time alone, except for her visits to the hospital to see her friend Margaret, who passed away 2 days after your encounter. Jason felt a pang of sadness for Eleanor, imagining her spending her final weeks in solitude, grieving the loss of her last close friend. "The thing is, Mr. Parker," Mr. Chen continued, "Mrs. Whitman was quite well off. Her husband had been a successful businessman, and they had invested wisely over the years. She owned her home outright, had substantial savings, and held several investment accounts." Jason nodded politely, wondering where this conversation was leading. "She also had a will that left everything to various charities," Mr. Chen said, "but after meeting you, she changed it." The lawyer slid a document across the table, the formal language of legal documents dense and intimidating. Jason scanned the pages, looking for something that made sense. "I don't understand," Jason said finally. "What does this have to do with me?" Mr. Chen leaned forward, his expression serious but kind. "Mr. Parker, Eleanor Whitman has left you her house." Jason stared at the lawyer, certain he had misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "Her house on Elm Street, along with all furnishings and a cash bequest of $50,000 to help with the transition and any expenses. She's left everything else to charity as originally planned, but the house is yours." Jason felt the world tilt sideways. He set down his coffee cup with shaking hands, his mind struggling to process what he was hearing. "That's impossible. I met her once. One time. I gave her a 5-minute ride home. 5 minutes, that meant everything to her," Mr. Chen said softly. He pulled out another document, this one handwritten in Eleanor's careful script. "She left you a letter. Would you like me to read it, or would you prefer to read it yourself?" With trembling fingers, Jason took the letter. Eleanor's handwriting was elegant and precise, the penmanship of someone from a generation that had learned to write properly. "Dear Jason," the letter began, "if you are reading this, then I have passed on, and you are learning about my decision to leave you my home. I imagine you are confused and perhaps overwhelmed, so let me try to explain. I have lived in my house on Elm Street for 42 years. My husband Richard and I bought it when we were newlyweds, dreaming of filling it with children and laughter. Life had different plans for us, and we were never blessed with children of our own. But we filled that house with love anyway, with dinner parties and holiday celebrations, with quiet evenings by the fireplace and lazy Sunday mornings in the garden. After Richard died, the house became my sanctuary, but also my prison. I couldn't bear to leave the memories behind, but living alone with those memories became increasingly difficult. In recent years, especially after my dear friend Margaret became ill, I often felt invisible, like I was disappearing a little more each day. Then came that rainy night when you stopped to help a stranger. You didn't know me anything, and clearly had your own troubles and responsibilities waiting at home. But you saw me, really saw me, and treated me like I mattered. In our brief conversation, you shared your own pain and allowed me to offer what little comfort I could. For the first time in months, I felt useful, valued, connected to another human being. I learned about your circumstances from our conversation and from some discreet inquiries afterward. Please forgive an old woman's curiosity, but I wanted to understand the man who had shown me such unexpected kindness. I learned about your wife's death, about your struggles to provide for your daughter while working 2 jobs, about your character and your heart. I have no family who needs this house, no children or grandchildren to carry on the memories Richard and I made here. But you have a daughter who deserves a stable home, a yard to play in. A place where she can grow up surrounded by love instead of worry about rent and bills. This is not charity, Jason. This is gratitude. This is an old woman's hope that a house built for love will be filled with love again. I can think of no better legacy for the home Richard and I shared than to see it become a place where a father and daughter can build their own dreams. Please don't feel obligated to keep the house if it doesn't suit your needs. You are free to sell it and use the money however you see fit, but I hope you will consider making it your home. because I believe good things happen when good people are given the chance to flourish. Thank you, dear Jason, for making an old woman feel seen and valued in her final weeks. Take care of yourself and that precious daughter of yours. With love and gratitude, Eleanor Whitman. Jason read the letter twice before setting it down, his eyes blurring with tears he hadn't expected. The generosity of it, the thoughtfulness, the way Eleanor had somehow seen past their brief encounter to understand exactly what he and Emma needed, left him speechless. "This is incredible," Jason whispered. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything right now," Mr. Chen said kindly. "This is a lot to process, but there are some practical matters we need to discuss." For the next hour, Mr. Chen walked Jason through the legal details. The house was being transferred to him free and clear, with all taxes and fees handled by Eleanor's estate. The $50,000 would be available within a week, enough to provide a substantial emergency fund and help with any immediate expenses. There were no strings attached, no conditions beyond Jason's acceptance of the bequest. "What about her relatives?" Jason asked. "Surely someone in her family should inherit this." "Mrs. Whitman was very clear about her wishes," Mr. Chen assured him. "She left generous donations to several charities and some personal items to distant relatives. But she wanted you to have the house. Her family has been notified, and while they were surprised, they have no legal grounds to contest the will, nor had they expressed any intention to do so." Jason thought about Emma, about the cramped apartment they shared, about the constant worry about rent and utilities, and whether they would have to move again if his circumstances changed. He thought about Eleanor's letter, about her hope that the house would be filled with love again. "When can I see it?" Jason asked. "Whenever you'd like," Mr. Chen replied, pulling out a set of keys. "These are yours now. The utilities are still connected, and Mrs. Whitman had a service that maintained the yard and cleaned the house weekly. That service is paid through the end of the year." Jason took the keys, their weight somehow heavier than metal should be. They represented possibility, stability, a future he had never dared to imagine for himself and Emma. "Mr. Chen," Jason said slowly, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Is this real? Is this some kind of mistake that's going to be corrected later? Because I can't afford to hope for something this big only to have it taken away." The lawyer's expression grew gentle, understanding. "Mr. Parker, I've been practicing law for 15 years, and I've never seen a will more carefully considered or legally sound. Mrs. Whitman spent considerable time with me making sure every detail was correct, every possibility accounted for. This house is yours, free and AI. Clear? With no conditions and no possibility of reversal. It's real." Jason nodded, still struggling to believe it. "I need to tell Emma. I need to see the house with her, make sure it feels right." "Of course," Mr. Chen agreed. "Take all the time you need. The house isn't going anywhere." That evening, Jason sat Emma down after dinner and tried to explain what had happened. He'd always been honest with her about their circumstances, age-appropriate honesty that acknowledged their challenges without burdening her with adult worries. So she understood that money was tight and that they were doing their best to make ends meet. "Do you remember a few weeks ago when I gave a ride to an elderly lady in the rain?" Jason began. Emma nodded. "The one Mrs. Rodriguez told me about, the hero thing. Well, that lady's name was Eleanor, and she was a very kind person. She lived alone in a house not far from here, and she didn't have any family nearby." Jason paused, still struggling with how to explain Eleanor's death to an 8-year-old who had already experienced too much loss in her young life. "Eleanor got sick and went to heaven," Jason continued gently. "But before she did, she made a decision about her house. She decided that she wanted us to have it. Emma's eyes widened. Her house? To live in? If we want to, yes. It would be our house, Em. No more worrying about rent. No more having to move if things get tight. It would be ours. Emma was quiet for a long moment, processing this information with the seriousness she brought to all important matters. Why did she give it to us? Did she know us? She didn't know us well, Jason admitted. But she knew enough. She knew that I was working hard to take care of you, and she knew that we could use some help. Sometimes people do incredibly generous things because they want to make the world a little better. Like how you helped her when she was standing in the rain? Jason nodded, struck again by his daughter's ability to see connections that adults might miss. Exactly like that. Can we see it? Emma asked, excitement beginning to creep into her voice. Can we see our house? Tomorrow after school, Jason promised. We'll go look at it together, and if it feels right, we'll start planning our move. That night, after Emma had gone to bed, Jason sat alone in their small apartment and tried to process the day's events. The keys to Eleanor's house sat on the kitchen table, catching the light from the overhead fixture like small beacons of possibility. He thought about Eleanor's letter, about her hope that the house would be filled with love again, and he felt a responsibility that was both overwhelming and inspiring. For 3 years, he had been focused on survival, on getting through each day, and providing the basics for Emma. He had learned to think small, to hope for little things like making it through the month without an emergency expense, or finding a few extra hours to spend with his daughter. The idea of thinking big again, of planning for a future that included stability and possibility, felt foreign and frightening and wonderful. Jason picked up his phone and called his sister Linda, who lived across the country with her own family. They spoke regularly but briefly. Their conversations usually focused on Emma's latest achievements or the challenges of single parenting. Tonight, he needed to tell someone about Eleanor, about the incredible gift she had given them, about the mix of gratitude and disbelief that was keeping him awake. Jason? Linda answered on the second ring, her voice slightly worried. Is everything okay? You usually don't call this late. Everything's fine, Jason said, then laughed at the inadequacy of that statement. Actually, everything's more than fine. Lynn, you're not going to believe what happened today. As he told his sister about Eleanor, about the lawyer's call, about the house and the letter and the impossible generosity of it all, Jason found himself crying. Not the bitter tears he had shed in the months after Sarah's death, but tears of gratitude and relief and hope for the future. Jason, that's incredible, Linda said when he finished. It's like something out of a movie. Are you sure it's all legitimate? The lawyer assured me it is. I've got the keys in my hand, Lynn. Tomorrow, Emma and I are going to see our new home. Our new home, Linda repeated softly. I love the sound of that. You deserve this, Jason. You've worked so hard, sacrificed so much. If anyone deserves a miracle, it's you. I keep thinking about what I did to earn this, Jason said. I gave an old lady a ride home, 5 minutes out of my day. It doesn't seem like enough. Maybe that's the point, Linda suggested. Maybe the most powerful acts of kindness are the ones that don't feel like a big deal to us but mean everything to someone else. You saw Eleanor when she needed to be seen, and she never forgot that. After they hung up, Jason sat in the quiet apartment and thought about Linda's words. He remembered Eleanor's expression when he had stopped to offer her a ride, the surprised gratitude that had suggested she wasn't accustomed to strangers caring about her welfare. He thought about her stories during their brief drive, the loneliness that had colored her words even as she tried to maintain a cheerful demeanor. In helping Eleanor, Jason had been acting on instinct, the same protective impulse that drove him to work double shifts for Emma, the same desire to shield the vulnerable from harm that had shaped his approach to fatherhood. He hadn't thought of it as heroic or even particularly noteworthy. just the right thing to do in that moment. But Eleanor had seen something different, something worth remembering and rewarding in a way that would change his and Emma's lives forever. Her gift wasn't just a house and financial security. It was validation that his efforts to be a good man and a good father hadn't gone unnoticed by the universe. The next afternoon, Jason picked Emma up from school and drove toward Elm Street, his daughter practically bouncing in her booster seat with excitement. They had talked about the house all morning over breakfast, Emma asking dozens of questions about what it would look like, whether it had a backyard, if there were other kids in the neighborhood. As they turned onto Elm Street, Jason felt his breath catch in his throat. Seeing Eleanor's house in daylight, knowing it was now his responsibility and Emma's home, made the reality of their situation hit him with renewed force. The house looked even more charming than he remembered from that rainy night, its white picket fence and flower beds speaking of decades of careful attention and love. "Is that it, Daddy?" Emma asked, pressing her face to the window as Jason pulled into the driveway. "That's it, sweetheart. That's our house." Emma was out of the car before Jason had fully turned off the engine. Running up the front walkway to examine the porch swing and the carved wooden door with its stained glass window, Jason followed more slowly, the keys heavy in his hand as he approached the front door. "It's like a fairy tale house," Emma breathed, running her small fingers along the intricate woodwork of the porch railings. "Did a princess live here?" "A very kind lady lived here," Jason said, unlocking the front door. "And she wanted us to live here too." The interior of the house took Jason's breath away. Eleanor had clearly been a woman of excellent taste, and every room reflected careful attention to both beauty and comfort. The living room featured built-in bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes, a stone fireplace with family photos on the mantel, and furniture that managed to be both elegant and inviting. Emma ran from room to room, her footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors as she discovered each new space. "Daddy, look! There's a window seat in the kitchen. And the bathroom upstairs has a bathtub with feet like a lion." Jason wandered through the house more slowly, taking in the details that spoke of Eleanor's life with Richard. Wedding photos from the 1970s showed a radiant young couple full of hope, dreams. Travel souvenirs suggested adventures to Europe and Asia. A sewing room upstairs contained beautiful quilts that Eleanor had clearly made by hand, each one a work of art that represented hours of patient craftsmanship. The master bedroom was painted in soft blues and whites, with lace curtains that filtered the afternoon sunlight into gentle patterns on the floor. Jason could picture Eleanor and Richard sharing this space for decades, growing old together, surrounded by the accumulated treasures of a lifetime spent in love. "Daddy, come see," Emma called from down the hall. "There's a room that could be perfect for me." Jason found her in what had clearly been a guest bedroom, smaller than the master but with two large windows that filled the space with natural light. The walls were painted a cheerful yellow, and built-in shelves would be perfect for Emma's books and toys. "What do you think, Em? Could you be happy here?" Emma spun in a circle, her arms outstretched, a huge smile on her face. "It's perfect, Daddy. It's the most perfect room I've ever seen." "And did you see the backyard?" Together they explored the garden, which was even more impressive than Jason had realized. Eleanor had clearly been an accomplished gardener, with flower beds that showed careful planning and attention to seasonal blooming. There was a vegetable garden with raised beds, a small greenhouse, and even a tree swing hanging from an ancient oak tree. "We could have our own tomatoes," Emma said, examining the garden beds with the intensity of someone planning major agricultural operations. "And maybe some flowers for my teacher. She loves flowers." Jason sat on the back porch steps and watched his daughter explore their new world, his heart full of gratitude and disbelief. 3 weeks ago, he had been exhausted and worried about making rent. Now he was looking at a future where Emma could have her own room, her own yard, stability that he had never dared to hope for. His phone buzzed with a text message, and Jason was surprised to see it was from Mike at the auto shop. Heard some crazy rumors about you inheriting a house. Please tell me it's true, and not just Henderson making stuff up again. Jason smiled, realizing that news had already begun to spread through their small community. Millbrook was the kind of town where good news traveled as fast as gossip. And apparently someone had seen him at the lawyer's office or noticed him at Eleanor's house. He texted back, "It's true. Long story, but Em and I just got very lucky." Mike's response was immediate. "Holy shit, Jason! That's incredible. We need to celebrate. Drinks tonight?" For the first time in years, Jason found himself tempted to say yes. He wanted to celebrate. Wanted to share this incredible turn of events with friends who had supported him through the difficult years. But Emma was still exploring the house, and he wanted to be present for every moment of her discovery. "Rain check," he texted back. "Still processing everything." They spent 2 hours exploring every corner of the house. From the finished basement with its workshop and storage areas to the attic with its carefully organized boxes of Christmas decorations and seasonal items, Eleanor had clearly been someone who took care of her possessions. Everything was clean, organized, and well-maintained. In the kitchen, Jason found a folder labeled House Information. That contained warranties for appliances, contact information for repair services, and detailed notes about the care and maintenance of various systems. Eleanor had even left a list of her favorite local businesses. From the grocery store that carried the best fresh bread to the handyman who had helped her with small repairs over the years. She thought of everything, Jason murmured, flipping through pages of careful documentation. Emma appeared at his elbow, having finished her exploration of the main floor. "Dottie, can we move in tomorrow?" Jason laughed, pulling her onto his lap. "It's not quite that simple, sweetheart. We need to pack our things, arrange to have the utilities switched to our names, and give notice to our landlord. But soon. Very soon." "How soon is soon? How about next weekend? We could spend Saturday moving our stuff, and Sunday we could have our first breakfast in our new kitchen." Emma's eyes lit up. "Really? Next weekend?" "Really?" That evening, after they had returned to their apartment and Emma had called her Aunt Linda to describe every detail of the new house, Jason sat down with a legal pad and began making lists. There were so many practical considerations, from changing Emma's school registration to reflect their new address, to arranging for internet installation. But each item on his list felt like a step toward a better future, rather than another overwhelming obligation. He called his landlord to give notice, expecting some pushback about breaking their lease early. Instead, Mrs. Patterson was surprisingly understanding. "I heard about your good fortune," she said warmly. "Eleanor Whitman was a lovely woman. I'm so happy for you and Emma. Don't worry about the lease. We'll work something out." It seemed like everyone in Millbrook had heard about Eleanor's bequest by now, and the response from their community was overwhelmingly positive. Jason's coworkers at both jobs were thrilled for him. Neighbors stopped by to congratulate him. And even Emma's teacher sent home a note expressing her excitement about Emma's new stability. "It's like the whole town is rooting for us," Jason told Linda during their nightly phone call. "Because they are," Linda replied. "You've been working so hard for so long, taking care of everyone else. People notice that kind of thing, and they're happy to see good things happen to good people." The moving process turned into a community effort. Mike and several other guys from the auto shop showed up with trucks and strong backs, insisting that Jason shouldn't have to hire movers. Mrs. Rodriguez cried as she helped Key. Emma packed her toys, promising to visit often and expressing her joy that Emma would have a real yard to play in. The woman who ran the warehouse where Jason worked his evening shift surprised him by saying he could cut back to part-time hours if he wanted, now that his housing expenses would be dramatically reduced. For the first time in 3 years, Jason found himself with choices, options that didn't all revolve around pure survival. On moving day, Emma woke up before dawn. Too excited to sleep, she had packed and repacked her belongings multiple times, carefully organizing her books and toys for their transition to the new house. Jason found her sitting on her bed, still in her pajamas, staring at the boxes that contained her entire world. "Second thoughts?" Jason asked, sitting beside her. "No," Emma said quickly. "I'm just thinking about Mommy." "Do you think she would like her new house?" Jason felt the familiar tightness in his chest that came whenever Emma mentioned Sarah. His daughter's memories of her mother were precious but sometimes heartbreaking, filtered through the limited understanding of a 5-year-old at the time of Sarah's death. "I think Mommy would love it," Jason said honestly. "She always wanted you to have a big backyard in your own room. She would be so happy to know you'll be safe and comfortable. And she would like Eleanor, right? For giving us the house?" "She would love Eleanor," Jason agreed. "Your mom always said that angels come in all forms, and I think Eleanor was definitely an angel." Emma nodded solemnly, then brightened. "Maybe they're friends now, in heaven. Maybe Mommy told Eleanor to help us." The simplicity and faith of her 8-year-old logic brought tears to Jason's eyes. "Maybe she did, sweetheart. Maybe she did." By noon, their small apartment was empty and their belongings were being carried into Eleanor's house, now legally and officially their home. Jason stood in the driveway, watching Mike and the other volunteers haul furniture and boxes, overwhelmed by the generosity of his community and the magnitude of the change happening in his life. Emma ran between the trucks and the house, directing the placement of her belongings with the authority of someone who had been planning this move for weeks. She had already decided that her stuffed animals would live on the built-in shelves, her earth supplies would go in the sunny window alcove, and her books would share space with some of Eleanor's volumes in the living room. "It's like they were waiting for us," Emma announced, watching as her small desk fit perfectly into the corner of her new bedroom. By evening, they were officially residents of Elm Street. Their possessions looked almost lost in the larger space, but Emma had already claimed every corner as her own, running through the house with the confidence of someone who finally had room to spread out and grow. For dinner, they ordered pizza and ate it picnic style on the living room floor, the boxes around them evidence of their new beginning. Emma fell asleep on the couch, exhausted by the excitement and activity of the day, and Jason carried her up to her new bedroom, tucking her into the same bed she had slept in at the apartment, but somehow everything felt different in this new space. Jason stood in the doorway of Emma's room, watching her sleep in the soft light from the hallway. For the first time in 3 years, he felt like he could breathe freely, like the constant weight of worry and uncertainty had been lifted from his shoulders. He wandered to the house, turning off lights and checking locks, the familiar routine of closing up for the night, taking on new significance in their new home. In the kitchen, he found Eleanor's folder of house information and flipped through it again, marveling at her thoroughness and consideration. At the back of the folder, he discovered an envelope marked for Jason that he hadn't noticed before. Inside was another handwritten note from Eleanor, shorter than her formal letter but somehow more personal. "Dear Jason," it read, "If you are reading this, then you have decided to make this house your home. And I couldn't be happier. I hope you and Emma will fill these rooms with laughter and love, holiday celebrations and quiet evenings, all the things that make a house truly alive. Please don't feel obligated to keep everything exactly as Richard and I left it. This is your home now, and you should make it reflect your family's needs and tastes. But if you find something of ours that brings you joy or comfort, Please know that we would be honored to have it remain part of the house's story. There are a few practical things I should mention. The rose bushes in the back garden need to be pruned in late February. The furnace filter should be changed every 3 months. And I always use the same company for maintenance. Their number is in the folder. The neighbor to the east, Mrs. Murphy, is lovely but tends to be chatty, just so you're prepared. Most importantly, please know that this gift comes with no expectations or obligations beyond your own happiness. You have already given me more than you know by reminding me that kindness still exists in the world. Everything else is just my way of saying thank you. Welcome home, Eleanor. Jason read the note 3 times, then carefully placed it back in the folder. Tomorrow he would start the process of truly making this house their own. But tonight he simply wanted to sit in Eleanor's kitchen and absorb the reality of their incredible good fortune. He thought about the chain of events that had brought them here, how a simple decision to stop and help a stranger had led to this moment. If he had driven past Eleanor that rainy night, if he had been too tired or too focused on getting home to notice her struggling with her broken umbrella, none of this would have happened. The randomness of it was both humbling and inspiring. Eleanor had been right when she said that sometimes 5 minutes could change everything. Jason had learned that kindness was not just about helping others. It was about opening yourself to the possibility that the universe might surprise you with gifts you never expected. Over the following weeks, Jason and Emma settled into their new life, with a joy that seemed to infect everyone around them. Emma's grades improved as the stress of their previous financial uncertainty lifted, and she threw herself into gardening with Eleanor's tools, determined to maintain the beautiful flower beds. Jason was able to quit his second job at the warehouse, using the extra time to be more present for Emma and to take on some freelance automotive work that paid better than his warehouse wages. For the first time since Sarah's death, he had the luxury of turning down jobs that didn't interest him or didn't pay enough. The neighbors on Elm Street welcomed them warmly, and Emma quickly made friends with children her age who lived within walking distance. Jason found himself invited to neighborhood barbecues and block parties, part of the community in a way he hadn't experienced since Sarah's illness had isolated them from social activities. Mrs. Murphy, Eleanor's chatty neighbor, turned out to be a treasure trove of stories about Eleanor and Richard's life in the house. She told Jason about Eleanor's famous Christmas parties, about the summer evenings when she and Richard would sit on their porch swing and wave to neighbors walking by, about the way Eleanor had cared for her garden like it was a work of art. She used to say that house was too big for one person, Mrs. Murphy confided during one of their conversations over the fence. She would have been so happy to see Emma playing in that backyard, to hear voices and laughter filling those rooms again. 3 months after moving in, Jason received another call from Robert Chen, the lawyer who had handled Eleanor's estate. This time, the news was different, but equally surprising. Mr. Parker, I have some additional information about Mrs. Whitman's bequest, but I think you'll find interesting, Mr. Chen said when Jason answered the phone. More surprises? Jason asked, wondering what else Eleanor could have planned. In a way, yes. Mrs. Whitman had instructed me to wait 3 months after you took possession of the house before sharing this information, to make sure you were settled and comfortable with your new situation. Jason sat down at Eleanor's kitchen table, now his kitchen table, and prepared himself for whatever revelation was coming. Mrs. Whitman established a trust fund for Emma's education, Mr. Chin continued. It's substantial enough to cover college tuition at any university she chooses, plus graduate school if she's interested. The fund will be available when Emma turns 18, but it's growing with interest until then. Jason felt his knees go weak. Eleanor's generosity had already changed their lives in ways he was still processing, but knowing that Emma's future education was secure removed the last major source of his parental anxiety. How much? Jason managed to ask. Currently about $200,000, and it should be considerably more by the time Emma needs it. Jason put his head in his hands, overwhelmed once again by Eleanor's thoughtfulness, She had not only given them stability in the present, but had secured Emma's future in ways that Jason could never have managed on his own. "There's one more thing," Mr. Chen said gently. "Mrs. Whitman wanted you to know that she had been watching your family for a few weeks after your initial meeting. Not in a creepy way," he added quickly, "but she had asked some mutual acquaintances about your situation. She knew about your work ethic, your dedication to Emma, your character. This wasn't an impulsive decision based on one encounter. It was a careful choice made by someone who recognized genuine goodness when she saw it." After hanging up with the lawyer, Jason sat in the quiet kitchen and thought about Eleanor's extraordinary gift. She had given them not just a house and financial security, but hope for the future, belief in themselves, and proof that good things could happen to people who tried to do right by others. That evening, he sat Emma down for another serious conversation about their benefactor and the additional gift she had left them. "Eleanor set aside money for your college," Jason explained, watching Emma's face as she processed this information. "College is expensive, right?" Emma asked, with the practical understanding of a child who had grown up aware of financial constraints. "Very expensive, but now you don't have to worry about that. You can focus on studying and learning and figuring out what you want to be when you grow up." Emma was quiet for a moment, then looked up at her father with eyes that were wise beyond her years. "Daddy, we should do something nice for someone else, like Eleanor did for us." Jason smiled, proud of his daughter's instinct toward generosity even as they were the recipients of such extraordinary kindness. "What did you have in mind?" "I don't know yet, but we should think about it. We should find someone who needs help and help them." Over the following months, Jason and Emma began looking for ways to pay Eleanor's kindness forward. They volunteered at the local food bank, adopted an elderly neighbor who needed help with yard work, and Emma started a small fund at her school to help families who couldn't afford supplies for art projects. Jason also began stopping more often to help people he encountered who seemed to need assistance, carrying groceries for elderly shoppers, helping stranded motorists, offering rides to people caught in bad weather. Each act felt like a small tribute to Eleanor's memory and a way of honoring the gift she had given them. 1 year after Eleanor's death, Jason and Emma held a small memorial service in their backyard garden. They invited Mrs. Murphy and a few other neighbors who had known Eleanor, sharing stories about her life and expressing gratitude for her continued impact on their lives. Emma had written a letter to Eleanor, which she read aloud under the oak tree where her swing hung. The letter thanked Eleanor for their house, for her college fund, for teaching them about kindness, and for proving that angels were real and sometimes lived right next door. Jason planted a new rose bush in Eleanor's honor, choosing a variety called Angel Face that he thought she would have appreciated. As he worked the soil with Eleanor's gardening tools, he reflected on how dramatically their lives had changed since that rainy night when he had stopped to help a stranger. He thought about Sarah often, imagining how thrilled she would have been to see Emma thriving in their new home, secure in her future and surrounded by love. He believed that somehow Sarah and Eleanor had conspired to bring this miracle into their lives, two angels working together to ensure that the people they cared about were taken care of. Emma started 4th grade that fall in their neighborhood school, walking the 3 blocks each morning with friends who lived nearby. Her teacher commented on her confidence and enthusiasm, her willingness to help classmates who were struggling, her natural leadership abilities that seemed to bloom in the security of their stable home life. Jason had begun dating again, tentatively and carefully, but with an openness to possibility that hadn't existed during their years of financial struggle. He met Rebecca at one of the neighborhood gatherings, a widow herself who worked as a nurse at the local hospital. Their relationship developed slowly, built on friendship and shared values, with Emma's approval and enthusiasm for this new person in their lives. Rebecca had known Eleanor professionally, having cared for her during a brief hospitalization the year before her death. She shared stories about Eleanor's wit and kindness, her concern for other patients, her gratitude for the small attentions that made hospital stays more bearable. "She talked about you and Emma sometimes," Rebecca told Jason during one of their quiet dinners after Emma had gone to bed. "She never mentioned giving you the house, but she would light up when she talked about the ride you gave her, about Emma's art project for school, about how hard you were working to provide for her. She was keeping tabs on us," Jason said, touched by Eleanor's continued interest in their lives. "She cared about you," Rebecca corrected gently. "She saw something special in your family, and she wanted to make sure you were okay." 2 years after moving into Eleanor's house, Jason proposed to Rebecca in the backyard garden, with Emma's enthusiastic participation in the planning and execution of the surprise. They were married the following spring in the same garden, with Emma as maid of honor and Mrs. Murphy providing commentary on how beautiful the roses looked as a backdrop for the ceremony. Eleanor's house had become truly their own, filled with the laughter and love she had hoped for, a place where Emma could grow up surrounded by stability and possibility. They kept many of Eleanor's belongings, the pieces that felt like they belonged to the house's story, but they also added their own touches, their own memories, their own traditions. Emma started high school with confidence and ambition, already thinking about college and career possibilities that had seemed impossible during their years of struggle. She volunteered regularly at the hospital where Rebecca worked, drawn to the idea of helping people the way Eleanor had helped them. Jason expanded his automotive business, eventually opening his own shop with the financial stability that Eleanor's gift had provided. He employed several people from their community, offering the kind of steady, well-paying work that he had once needed so desperately himself. On quiet evenings, Jason would sometimes sit on the porch swing where Eleanor and Richard had spent so many years watching the world go by, thinking about the chain of kindness that had brought his family to this place of Cain. Happiness and security. He would remember Eleanor's words about 5 minutes changing everything, about the power of small acts of compassion to create ripples that extended far beyond their original impact. Emma, now a confident teenager, would sometimes join him on the swing, and they would talk about their plans for the future, their gratitude for the past, their determination to keep Eleanor's legacy of kindness alive in their daily lives. "Do you think Eleanor knew how much she was changing our lives?" Emma asked one evening as they watched the sunset paint the sky behind their oak tree. "I think she hoped," Jason replied, putting his arm around his daughter. "I think she believed that good things happen when good people are given the chance to flourish, and she wanted to give us that chance. We should make sure we give other people chances too," Emma said, a statement that had become a guiding principle for their family. "We will," Jason promised. "Every day, in every way we can." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Jason thought about Eleanor's final gift, not the house or the money or even the security, but the lesson she had taught them about the transformative power of kindness. She had shown them that a single act of compassion could change everything, that seeing and valuing another person's humanity was perhaps the most important thing anyone could do. The house on Elm Street stood as a testament to Eleanor's belief in the goodness of people and the possibility of second chances. It had been built for love, filled with love, and given in love, and it continued to be a place where love could grow and flourish and spread to others who needed it. In the end, Eleanor Whitman's greatest gift wasn't the house itself, but the proof that kindness mattered, that good people were rewarded, and that sometimes the smallest gestures created the biggest miracles. Jason and Emma carried that lesson with them every day, looking for their own opportunities to make 5 minutes that could change everything, to be the unexpected blessing in someone else's story of struggle and hope. The legacy of that rainy night continued to ripple outward, touching lives in ways that Eleanor could never have imagined, proving that sometimes the most profound acts of love come from strangers who choose to see and respond to the humanity in others, one small kindness at a time. 5 years later, Emma stood at the podium of Millbrook Community Center, addressing a room full of high school students gathered for the annual Eleanor Whitman Scholarship presentation. At 19, she had grown into a poised young woman whose confidence and compassion reflected the stability and love that had shaped her teenage years. "When I was 8 years old," Emma began, her voice carrying across the crowded room, "my father taught me that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they're just people who stop when someone needs help, who choose kindness when they could choose indifference." In the audience, Jason sat beside Rebecca, their twin toddlers, Sarah and Eleanor, quiet for once as they sensed the importance of the moment. Jason's hair had begun to show gray at the temples, but his eyes held a contentment that had been missing during those exhausting years of double shifts and constant worry. Emma continued her speech, describing how a single act of compassion had transformed not just her family's circumstances, but their entire understanding of what was possible when people cared for one another. The scholarship fund, established with a portion of Eleanor's education trust, had already helped 12 students from low-income families pursue higher education. "Mrs. Whitman believed that education was the greatest gift you could give someone," Emma explained. But she also understood that sometimes people need help believing they deserve that gift. These scholarships aren't just about money. They're about telling someone that their dreams matter, that their potential is worth investing in. After the ceremony, as families mingled and scholarship recipients posed for photographs with their families, Jason found himself approached by a familiar face. Margaret Chen, Robert's daughter, had been one of the first scholarship recipients 3 years earlier and was now finishing her degree in social work. "Mr. Parker," Margaret said, her smile bright with gratitude, "I wanted to thank you again, not just for the scholarship, but for starting something that's changed so many lives." Jason shook his head modestly. "Emma and Eleanor deserve the credit for that. I was just along for the ride." "That's not what I heard," Margaret replied with a knowing look. "My father told me about the night this all started, about you stopping to help a stranger in the rain. That choice to stop, that's where everything began." As the evening wound down, the Parker family walked home through the familiar streets of their neighborhood, the twins finally asleep in their stroller, Emma walking alongside them as she prepared to return to college for her senior year. The streetlights illuminated the same route Jason had driven that night 6 years ago, but everything about his world had changed. "Dad," Emma said quietly as they turned onto Elm Street, "I've been thinking about after graduation, about what comes next." Jason glanced at his daughter, noting the thoughtful expression that usually preceded her most important announcements. "What's on your mind?" "I want to start a nonprofit," Emma said, her words careful but determined. "Something that connects people who want to help with families who need support. Not just money, but mentorship, practical help, community building." Rebecca reached over and squeezed Emma's hand. "That sounds exactly like something Eleanor would have supported." "I was thinking about calling it 5 minutes," Emma continued, her voice gaining confidence. "Because you never know when 5 minutes of your time might change someone's entire life." Jason felt his throat tighten with pride and emotion. His daughter had inherited more than Eleanor's financial gifts. She had absorbed the deeper lesson about the transformative power of human connection and was ready to build her life around sharing that gift with others. "I think that's a beautiful idea," Jason said finally. "And I think you're exactly the right person to make it happen." 3 months later, Emma's nonprofit held its first community event in the backyard of the house on Elm Street. Neighbors, friends, and strangers came together for an afternoon of connection and service, organizing care packages for elderly residents, offering tutoring for struggling students, and simply creating opportunities for people to meet and support one another. Mrs. Murphy, now in her 80s but still sharp and opinionated, held court near the Rose Garden, regaling younger visitors with stories about Eleanor and Richard's legendary hospitality. "This is exactly what they would have wanted," she declared, gesturing toward the bustling activity filling every corner of the yard. Eleanor always said this house was meant to bring people together. As the afternoon progressed, Jason found himself manning a booth where people could sign up to volunteer for various community projects. He watched a teenager offer to walk dogs for elderly neighbors, saw a retired teacher volunteer to tutor kids struggling with math, witnessed conversation after conversation between people discovering they had more en common than they'd realized. "You know what I love about this?" Rebecca said, appearing at his elbow with their twins in tow. "It's not just about helping people, it's about helping people help each other." Sarah, their 3-year-old daughter, tugged on Jason's sleeve with the persistence that only toddlers possessed. "Daddy, why are all these people in our yard?" Jason lifted her up, settling her on his hip as he considered how to explain the concept of community service to someone who still thought sharing toys was a negotiable proposition. "Remember how we talk about being kind to people?" Jason began. "Well, all these people came here today because they want to be kind to other people in our neighborhood." "Like when you helped the old lady?" Sarah asked, her memory surprisingly sharp for events that had happened before her birth but had been retold countless times as family lore. "Exactly like that," Jason confirmed, touched that the story had become part of his youngest daughter's understanding of how the world should work. Eleanor, their other twin, had wandered over to examine the rose bush that bore her namesake's memory, her tiny fingers reaching toward the bright blooms. At 3, she showed signs of the same thoughtful nature that had always characterized Emma, watching the world around her with careful attention and responding to others with natural empathy. As the afternoon wound down and volunteers began cleaning up, Emma found Jason sitting on the porch swing, watching the organized chaos of putting away tables and folding chairs. Said, settling beside him. "What do you think? Was today what Eleanor would have wanted?" Jason considered the question, thinking about the woman who had seemed something worth investing in during their brief encounter 6 years ago. He thought about her letter, her hope that the house would be filled with love and laughter, her belief that good things happened when good people were given opportunities to flourish. Eleanor would have been amazed, Jason said finally. "She gave us a house and some financial security, but you've turned that into something that's going to help hundreds of people. That's not what she planned, but it's exactly what she would have hoped for." Emma leaned against her father's shoulder, a gesture that reminded Jason of all the times she had sought comfort and security from him during their difficult years. Now she was the one offering comfort to others, but the fundamental connection between them remained as strong as ever. "Dad," Emma said quietly, "do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't stopped that night? If you'd just driven past?" Jason had wondered about that countless times over the years, usually during quiet moments when he was overwhelmed by gratitude for how their lives had unfolded. The answer always came back to the same truth. "I think something else would have happened," he said honestly. "Maybe not the same thing, but something. Because the kind of person who stops to help someone in the rain is also the kind of person who finds other ways to make the world a little better. Eleanor didn't just see a good deed that night. She saw character, and character always finds a way to shine through." "You really believe that?" Emma asked. "I have to," Jason replied. "Because if I don't believe that good people get good things eventually, then Eleanor's gift doesn't make sense. But if I believe that kindness matters, that character counts, that small acts of love create bigger possibilities, then everything that's happened to us makes perfect sense." As autumn arrived, 5 Minutes had grown from Emma's college project into a thriving organization with volunteer coordinators in 3 neighboring towns. The simple concept of connecting people who wanted to help with people who needed support had resonated throughout their community, creating networks of mutual aid and friendship that extended far beyond Emma's krell. Original vision. Jason had taken over much of the day-to-day operations while Emma finished her senior year, discovering that he had a talent for organization and community building that had never had a chance to develop during his Prel. Years of survival-focused living. The work felt like a natural extension of everything Eleanor had taught them about the power of small gestures to create large changes. One particularly busy Thursday, as Jason coordinated volunteer schedules and fielded calls from people wanting to join the organization, his phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. The voice on the other end was hesitant, uncertain, belonging to someone who wasn't sure they had the right to ask for help. "Hi, I heard about your organization from someone at my daughter's school," the woman said. "I'm not sure if this is the kind of thing you do, but I'm in a really difficult situation and I don't know where else to turn." Jason settled back in his chair, giving the caller his full attention. "We're here to help however we can. What's going on?" The woman, who introduced herself as Maria Santos, explained that she was a single mother working 2 jobs while caring for her elderly father, who had recently been diagnosed with dementia. Her daughter was struggling in school because Maria couldn't afford tutoring. Her father needed constant supervision that she couldn't provide while working, and she was falling behind on everything from groceries to rent. "I heard that you help connect people," Maria continued, her voice breaking slightly. "I don't need money, exactly. I need to not feel so alone. I need to know that someone understands what it's like when you're trying to do everything by yourself and you're failing at all of it." Jason closed his eyes, remembering the bone-deep exhaustion and isolation he had felt during those years of double shifts and constant worry. He remembered the weight of responsibility, the fear of not being enough, the way hope could feel like a luxury he couldn't afford. "Maria," Jason said gently, "you're not failing at anything. You're carrying an impossible load, and the fact that you're still standing is proof of how strong you are. But you're right that you shouldn't have to carry it alone." Over the next hour, Jason worked with Maria to identify specific areas where 5 Minutes volunteers might be able to provide support. They found a retired teacher who could tutor her daughter, a college student studying gerontology who needed volunteer hours working with elderly clients, and 3 different families who could provide occasional PAV, childcare or meal assistance. But more than the practical help, Jason was able to offer Maria something that he had desperately needed during his own difficult years: the assurance that her struggles were temporary, that good people were willing to help, and that accepting help wasn't a sign of weakness, but a step toward building the kind of community where everyone looked out for each other. 2 weeks later, Jason received a thank you card from Maria's daughter, a hand-drawn picture of their family surrounded by hearts and smiley faces. The note inside, written in careful 3rd-grade handwriting, said, "Thank you for helping my mom smile again." That card joined dozens of others in Jason's office, each one representing a connection made, a problem solved, a moment when someone who needed help found someone willing to provide it. The walls of his workspace had become a gallery of gratitude, proof that Eleanor's initial act of faith in his character had multiplied into countless opportunities for others to experience and share kindness. Emma graduated summa cum laude that spring with a degree in nonprofit management and a job offer from a prestigious foundation in the state capital. The offer represented everything she had worked toward: a chance to make a difference on a larger scale, to bring the lessons she'd learned from Eleanor's gift to communities throughout the region. "I want to take the job," Emma told Jason during one of their regular breakfast conversations, "but I'm worried about leaving 5 Minutes when it's just getting started." Jason smiled at his daughter's dedication, recognizing the same sense of responsibility that had driven him to work double shifts rather than let Emma down. "5 Minutes isn't going anywhere," he assured her. "And neither am I. This is your chance to learn how other organizations do this work, to bring new ideas back to us. You're sure you can handle everything?" "Em, 6 years ago I could barely handle my own life. Now I'm running a nonprofit, raising twins, and married to an amazing woman who puts up with my tendency to take on too many projects. I think I can manage." Emma's departure for her new job that fall marked another transition for the Parker family, but rather than feeling like an ending, it felt like the natural progression of everything Eleanor had set in motion. Emma would continue the work on a larger scale while Jason deepened the roots in their community, creating a model that could inspire similar organizations elsewhere. The house on Elm Street remained the unofficial headquarters for 5 minutes, its spacious rooms and welcoming atmosphere providing the perfect setting for volunteer training sessions, planning meetings, and community gatherings. Rebecca had transformed Eleanor's old sewing room into a nursery for the twins, but she'd kept the quilts Eleanor had made, using them as inspiration for her own needlework projects that were donated to families in need. On quiet evenings, when the twins were asleep and Rebecca was working a late shift at the hospital, Jason would sometimes walk through the house and marvel at how naturally their lives had expanded to fill the space Eleanor had provided. The rooms that had once seemed too large for their small family now buzzed with activity and purpose, exactly as Eleanor had hoped they would. One such evening, as Jason was reviewing volunteer schedules in Eleanor's former study, he received an unexpected email from Robert Chen. The lawyer, now in his 50s and serving on the board of several local charities, had been following 5 Minutes Progress with interest and pride. "Jason," the email read, "I wanted to share something with you that I think you'll find meaningful. I recently had lunch with Eleanor's grandniece, who lives in California and whom Eleanor rarely saw during her final years. She had heard about your organization through mutual friends and wanted me to tell you how much it would have meant to Eleanor to see her gift continue to grow and multiply. But more than that, she wanted you to know that Eleanor had kept a scrapbook during her final months, filled with newspaper clippings about your automotive business, Emma's school achievements, and community events you both participated in. She was quietly keeping track of your family's progress, taking pride in your successes as if you were her own grandchildren. Her grandniece thought you should know that Eleanor's decision to leave you the house wasn't just about one act of kindness, but about the kind of people she could see you were becoming. She believed in your family's potential to make a positive difference, and everything you've accomplished since then has proven her instincts were correct. Eleanor would have been so proud of what you've built, not just for yourselves, but for your entire community. Her legacy lives on not just in the house you call home, but in every life you've touched through 5 Minutes and beyond." Jason printed the email and added it to the collection of meaningful correspondence he kept in Eleanor's desk, now his desk, in the room where she had once planned her garden and managed her household affairs. The revelation that Eleanor had continued to follow their progress, taking pride in their achievements from a distance, added another layer of poignancy to her gift. He thought about the scrapbook she had kept, imagining her carefully cutting out articles about Emma's science fair victories or Jason's expansion of his automotive business. The image of Eleanor sitting at this same desk, celebrating their successes in solitude, reinforced his understanding of the loneliness she had carried and the joy she had found in watching them thrive. Winter brought new challenges and opportunities for 5 Minutes. The holiday season revealed both the depth of need in their community and the remarkable generosity of people who had little to spare but chose to share it anyway. Families who had been helped by the organization earlier in the year returned as volunteers, creating a cycle of support that strengthened with each passing month. Maria Santos, the single mother Jason had helped connect with resources in the fall, organized a holiday meal program that fed 30 families, demonstrating how receiving help often inspired people to find ways to help others. Her daughter, whose grades had improved dramatically with tutoring support, made holiday cards for all the 5 Minutes volunteers, each one featuring her increasingly sophisticated artwork and heartfelt messages of gratitude. The annual Eleanor Whitman Memorial Scholarship Ceremony had grown from a simple presentation to a community celebration that filled the entire community center. This year's recipients included 2 students from neighboring towns who had heard about the program through 5 Minutes Expanding Network, proof that Eleanor's impact was reaching far beyond the boundaries of Millbrook. Emma returned home for the ceremony, her first visit since starting her new job, and Jason was struck by how much she had grown in just a few months. Her confidence had deepened, her vision had expanded, and she spoke with the authority of someone who had found her calling and was pursuing it with determination and skill. "Dad," Emma said as they walked home from the ceremony, "I've been thinking about something. What if we could replicate 5 minutes in other communities? Not just expand our current organization, but help other people start their own versions, adapted to their specific end. Needs and resources?" Jason considered the idea, recognizing the ambition and scope that had always characterized Emma's approach to problem solving. "That's a big vision, Em. What would that look like?" "Training materials, a network of support between organizations, maybe even a foundation that provides seed funding for communities that want to start their own programs. I've been learning so much about scaling social impact. And I think we could really make a difference on a much larger level." As they reached the house on Elm Street, Jason looked up at the windows glowing with warm light, the same windows Eleanor had looked through for decades as she watched her neighborhood change and grow. He thought about her hope that good things would happen when good people were given opportunities to flourish, and realized that Emma's vision was the natural evolution of that hope. "I think Eleanor would love that idea," Jason said finally. "And I think you're exactly the right person to make it happen." Spring arrived early that year, and with it came news that would change the trajectory of 5 Minutes once again. The state's largest community foundation had learned about their work and wanted to feature them in a documentary about innovative approaches to local problem solving. The attention would bring resources and opportunities, but also scrutiny and pressure to expand faster than might be sustainable. "It's a good problem to have," Rebecca observed during one of their family planning sessions as they worked through the implications of sudden growth and visibility. "But it's still a problem." Jason found himself thinking often about Eleanor's measured approach to generosity, the way she had carefully considered her gift and planned for its long-term impact, rather than acting impulsively. Her decision to leave them the house had been transformative precisely because it was sustainable, because she had thought through the practical implications and provided the resources they would need to succeed. "We need to be strategic," Jason decided. "We need to grow at a pace that allows us to maintain the quality of what we're doing, not just the quantity." The documentary crew spent a week in Millbrook, interviewing volunteers, filming success stories, and capturing the daily operations of 5 Minutes. Jason found himself uncomfortable with the attention, preferring the quiet satisfaction of individual connections to the spotlight of public recognition. But Emma thrived in the media environment, articulating their mission with passion and precision, explaining how their model could be adapted to different communities and scaled to address larger problems. Watching her on camera, Jason realized that his daughter had inherited Eleanor's gift for seeing possibilities where others saw only problems, for believing in human potential even when circumstances seemed overwhelming. The documentary aired 6 months later, generating hundreds of inquiries from communities interested in starting their own versions of 5 Minutes. Emma, who had by then left her foundation job to focus full-time on expansion, found herself traveling throughout the region, training new organizers and helping establish sister organizations. "I never expected this when I stopped to give an old lady a ride," Jason confided to Rebecca one evening as they watched their twins play in the backyard garden where Eleanor's roses continued to bloom each summer. "Maybe that's the point," Rebecca replied, settling beside him on the porch swing that had become their favorite spot for evening conversations. "Maybe the best things happen when we're not trying to change the world, just trying to help one person who needs it." 5 years after the documentary aired, the 5 Minutes Network included 47 organizations across 8 states, each one adapted to local needs but connected by shared values of community. support and mutual aid. Emma had written a book about the model, spoken at conferences around the country, and been recognized with numerous awards for social innovation. But the most meaningful recognition came from the people whose lives had been touched by the work. Families like Maria Santos, who had gone from receiving help to providing it. Students like Margaret Chen, who had used scholarship support to launch careers dedicated to service. Volunteers who had discovered that helping others was the key to their own sense of purpose and fulfillment. Jason, now in his early 50s, had found an unexpected second career as a community organizer and nonprofit leader. His automotive business continued to thrive, but his passion was increasingly focused on the connection and support work that had grown from Eleanor's original gift. The house on Elm Street remained the heart of their family life and their community work. Its rooms filled with the laughter of children, the voices of volunteers, and the quiet satisfaction of good work being done by people who cared about each other. Eleanor's presence could still be felt in the careful attention to detail that characterized everything they did, the hospitality that made everyone feel welcome, and the belief that small acts of kindness could indeed change the Baolai world. On the 10th anniversary of Eleanor's death, the Parker family held their largest memorial celebration yet. With representatives from 5 Minutes organizations across the region joining local volunteers and community members for an afternoon of stories, gratitude, and commitment to continuing the work Eleanor Crow had inspired. As the sun set over the garden where Eleanor had spent so many hours nurturing beauty and growth, Jason stood before the gathered crowd and reflected on the journey that had brought them all together. 10 years ago, Jason began, his voice carrying across the yard filled with friends and strangers who had become family. An elderly woman named Eleanor Whitman made a decision that changed my family's life. But more than that, she made a decision that has changed hundreds of lives, thousands of lives, in ways she never could have imagined. Eleanor believed that good things happen when good people are given opportunities to flourish. She believed that kindness matters, that character counts, and that sometimes 5 minutes of attention to another person's humanity can set in motion changes that ripple outward for generations. Today, as we honor her memory, we also celebrate proof that she was right. Every person here represents a connection made, a problem solved, a moment when someone who needed help found someone willing to provide it. Every success story, every scholarship recipient, every volunteer, every family that has been supported through difficult times is part of 15. Eleanor's legacy. But the most important part of her legacy isn't what she gave us. It's what she taught us about giving to others. Eleanor showed us that we all have the power to change someone's life, that we all have something to offer, that we all have opportunities every day to see and respond to the humanity in the people around us. So, as we remember Eleanor Whitman tonight, let's also commit to carrying forward the lesson she taught us. Let's look for the person standing in the rain, metaphorically or literally. Let's stop when someone needs help. Let's believe in the power of small kindnesses to create big changes. Let's never underestimate the impact we can have when we choose to see and value each other's humanity. Eleanor's gift to us was never just a house or money or security. Her gift was faith in our potential to make the world a little better, one act of kindness at a time. Tonight, surrounded by all of you, I know that faith was well placed. As the crowd dispersed and the cleanup began, Emma found her father sitting alone in the garden, looking up at the stars that were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "Thinking about Eleanor?" she asked, settling beside him on the bench he had installed near her memorial rose bush. "Thinking about everything," Jason replied. "About that rainy night. About all the things that had to happen exactly the way they did for us to end up here. About how one person's kindness can echo through so many lives." Emma nodded, understanding the weight of gratitude and responsibility that came with being the recipients of such extraordinary generosity. "Do you think she knew? Do you think she had any idea how far this would all reach? Jason considered the question, thinking about Eleanor's careful planning, her strategic approach to generosity, her faith in human potential. I think she hoped, he said finally. I think she planted a seed and trusted that good things would grow from it, but I don't think even Eleanor could have imagined this. They sat in comfortable silence, father and daughter, surrounded by the evidence of lives well lived and love well shared. The house behind them glowed with warm light, filled with family and friends cleaning up after another successful celebration of community and connection. In the distance, they could hear the twins laughing as Rebecca helped them get ready for bed, their voices joining the symphony of sounds that made this house truly alive. Sarah and Eleanor, now 8 years old, had grown up knowing that their home was special, that their family's story was intertwined with acts of kindness and generosity that stretched back before their birth and would continue long after they were grown. Dad, Emma said quietly, thank you for stopping that night. Thank you for being the kind of person who stops. Jason reached over and took his daughter's hand, thinking about all the people who had shaped them into who they had become. Sarah, whose love had given him the foundation to be a good father. Eleanor, whose gift had provided the security and opportunity they needed to flourish. Rebecca, whose partnership had shown him that second chances at love were possible. Emma herself, whose vision and determination had turned personal transformation into community change. Thank you for being the kind of person who sees possibilities everywhere, Jason replied. Thank you for taking Eleanor's gift and multiplying it into something that helps so many people. As they walked back toward the house, Jason thought about the road that stretched ahead, the work still to be done, the lives still to be touched. The 5 Minutes Network would continue to grow and evolve, adapting to new challenges and opportunities, always guided by Eleanor's fundamental belief in the power of human connection and mutual support. The house on Elm Street would remain the anchor for their family and their work, a symbol of what was possible when people chose to invest in each other's potential rather than turn away from each other's struggles. Eleanor's roses would bloom each spring, her memory would be honored each year, and her legacy would live on in every act of kindness performed by people who had been touched, directly or indirectly, by her extraordinary gift. And somewhere in the network of connections that stretched across states and communities, in the lives of families who had been helped, and volunteers who had found purpose, in the success stories of scholarship recipients and the gratitude of people who had discovered they were not alone in their struggles, Eleanor Whitman's 5 minutes of attention to a stranger in the rain continued to change everything, one person at a time, one act of kindness at a time, one moment of human connection at a time.